removed any radioactive debris. All the special agents, they were having all their bags scanned with Geiger counters and radiation detectors. They would be tracked and killed. When they found out a few months later that he told me this, after 2 hours of him giving me great detail of how they had done the forensics on the Khobar Towers explosion, terrorist tower explosion in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia a few years earlier, and that was 7 times larger ANFO, or ammonium nitrate, but it only blew the windows in. It was inferior concrete and steel and had virtually no effect. Virtually no effect on the building. He said the building was sheared by high explosives micronukes. I said, oh my God. I went home at night. A few months later when they found out, they court-martialed him and they fired me on the spot and gave me death threats. That's confirmation. If you want to know if you're getting a nerve, in surgery or in politics, see the response. If you get a denial by a government official or some corporatist functionary, you can be certain you've hit that nerve. Like when they want to kill you or fire you. So right now, I'm going to present you some very serious data about what's going on here. Anybody seen this guy before? Now, he wants to be Der Fuhrer of North America. His last name, of course, at Yale was Temporary. Did you know that was his name in the Yale Skull and Bones? How many people don't know that his name was Temporary? Temporary, yeah. They have to have what I call a sock puppet. He is like the Elmo to the New World Order. Have to have a little humor here. This is so dark, you have to have some humor. 1988, Tom Scott Gordon, who's a photographer at the World Trade Center complex, he was hired by the Port Authority of New York to take pictures for demolition. These buildings were planning demolition for almost 20 years before 9/11. Ruby Ridge, Randy Weaver's family were attacked with wife and kid. Her head was blown off and her child killed by ATF agents. Larry Pratt was the same FBI officer that ran the operations at Ruby Ridge and Waco and was the operational officer of the FBI at Elohim City in Oklahoma City that killed the brother of Jesse Trentadue, an attorney in Salt Lake City. I gave my affidavit 3 months ago about the proof that ATF and FBI special agents were running the entire operation. Got it? It was done by the U.S. government. They killed 168 citizens. I have VZ Lawton and others that I've had on my radio show. This was a crime against humanity, and the crime in 9/11 killed citizens of 82 nations, including Canadians. But yet, our Canadian government has the nerve to not investigate when there's full integration of NORAD. There's another NORAD headquarters in North Bay, Ontario, another full integration of the U.S. Space Command, Strategic Defense, and Star Wars, the DO line, etc., all of these early warning systems, and yet no one in Canada has raised the issue that in order for 9/11 to occur, there had to be full complicity with the Canadian military and the Canadian intelligence establishment of CSIS and the Royal Canadian Mounted Fuzz. Do you follow? We can't be quiet Canadians anymore. This is enough. Why has there not been an investigation? There have been calls for a repeated 9/11 investigation in the U.S., but guess what? We have a Canadian can opener. And we need to open up this can of ugly worms. Why has there been complicity? The uranium came from Uranium City, Saskatchewan. But guess what? The general that shot down the supposed Flight 93 over Shanksville, Pennsylvania, was a Canadian general. No one's talking about the fact that they were playing red team, blue team. I know about it because I worked in Operation Top Off in Dark Winter, and I have friends in NORAD, U.S. Space Command, Strategic Defense. And although I'm civilian, I worked with the military for almost 30 years, I can tell you these Canadians are just as guilty and just as complicit as the American bastards that did 9/11. Okay? So let's not think that we're, be arrogant Canadians over this. We have to start facing the ugly truth of what's gone on, that we haven't called for an investigation in Canada. Lenin said, show me the man and I will show you the crime. The Patriot Act, turning citizens into suspects since 2001. And by the way, this no-fly list, when I came here, I said to my wife, because I saw it announced the 18th, I said, well, I'll find out if I'm on a no-fly list. Because when I flew around, I did a lot of flying in the last 3 or 4 years, back and forth to the States as I closed my practice and literally started doing this full-time 3 years ago. My bags disappeared so often it was ridiculous. I thought they went to China and back. I get tags through my thing, TSA stuff, material stuffed all over the place. They must have thought I was shipping micro nukes. Whacking Hat Security, by the way, is guarding the treasure of the debris, the sacred sacrifice of Oklahoma City in a concrete capped-off facility. And the Whacking Hat Security is owned by Carlyle Group, which the Bin Ladens, the Royals, the Queen, our wonderful Queen, and George Bush and the Bin Laden families own. Isn't that wonderful? This is a picture of the front sheared off by not just regular explosives, but micronuclear bombs and C4 and high explosive core to the highest quality you can only get in the U.S. military. This shows you the World Trade Center complex map, a three-dimensional map. And what you can see here is you can see the positions of World Trade Center 6, 1, 2, and 7. And by the way, we know 7, no steel structure was ever followed by anything, even fires that were prolonged. This is spoken of many times, but I'm going to show you 30 anomalies today, 30 anomalies that can only be explained by the presence of the kind of explosive material and actions that occur with a nuclear device. Now, I fully believe that Professor Jones has proved beyond a reasonable doubt, and I'm a medical legal doctor, that there was thermate in the building. And my thesis is this, okay, if you take this from this meeting, they cut the lower floors because according to Professor Crockett Grabe, a University of Iowa physicist and University Caltech, that the floors had to fall away from each other from the bottom because if they pancaked, they would slow their descent by inertial momentum to 96 seconds. That's his calculations. So the floors had to be cut and blown out so the squibs would blow out, and the floors had to collapse away from each other and fall toward the base. But if you take the evidence of all of the witnesses, including William Rodriguez, you had to have bombs in the area around the core and then down in the basement and the sub-basement, which would have stripped off the flesh off that gentleman that came up the elevator shaft that William Rodriguez references to. And you had to have the disappearance of the radio tower that literally, you can see on video, turned to a vapor. A 90-foot tower becomes a vapor in a fraction of a second. And do you know anything else, including high explosives, that'll do that? No. The only thing that'll do it is a micro nuke. Now, I was to go into nuclear physics at MIT because I had special aptitudes in advanced chemistry and nuclear physics. And I can tell you, having worked as an occupational doctor and a member of the nuclear division of ACOM, yes, there was thermate. We have proof from their own U.S. Geological Survey there was also tritium, 1.1 billion, with a B, tritium units, at a minimum at World Trade Center 6. There was also 55 times background, and we have data pending from Industrial Analytical Services in Leominster, Massachusetts, and 3 specimens coming. I don't have it yet. I'm a scientist. I can't claim that I have it. But when you look at these anomalies, I'm just asking what I call Charlie Sheen questions. I don't have the answers yet, but when you look at this, is to say if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's not a moose. Okay? This shows you the core. 47 giant girders going to a quarter mile. Imagine the hundreds of thousands, millions of tons of steel, 5,000 tons of asbestos per tower, 100,000 tons of glass, millions of tons of steel girders, 4 feet thick, 47 of them, going a quarter mile into the sky. Can you imagine that turning into a vapor, an atomic vapor, in fractions of a second? Can you imagine it falling at free fall speeds which defy Newtonian physics? And believe me, the laws of physics were not suspended on 9/11 for that portion of space and time. Well, Dr. Ed Ward kind of made me aware of this, so I went back and researched, and I'm a real information hound, so I like to analyze it. So I saw this on Jeff Rentz's website, and it was referencing to an anonymous Finnish munitions expert who's still in active service. He is a shape charge expert, a nuclear demolitions expert in Finland. He came up with a number of anomalies that he found that indicated to him that there were the probability, again, I'm saying this probability because I'm a scientist, I can't say it's absolute yet, but by next week, if we have one test positive in 100 for these heavy isotopes, we have proof. But I already have the tritium data from their numbers, from the U.S. Geological. And then we take a number of things. The FLIR satellite infrared laser imaging, massive craters, footprint of the fallen World Trade Center. Then we have Ted Tweetmeyer. He's a Department of Defense engineer, NASA engineer, and he has analyzed the data and shown very significant proof of non-thermal paramagnetic effects, and I'll explain what that means. How many people here use electricity? Those who don't are asleep. When you have a little magnetic, paramagnetic disc. It's an aluminum disc inside your little meter in your home. And you get eddy currents of electricity when you put electricity through that. So as you draw more power, the disc spins faster and has little gears that will add up how many kilowatts or whatever of power you're using. When you have an EMP, which is what we call gigatesla, Tesla is a magnetic field equivalent, hundreds of thousands of Tesla magnetic field. So if you look at a magnetic field machine like an MRI, it's say 1.2 or 1.8 Tesla, T-E-S-L-A, the father of alternating current, the father of hydropower, the father of transmission of power by alternating current, as well as the Tesla coherence interferometry in terms of the Star Wars weapon systems that they've deployed. When you have a very powerful Tesla field, that pulse can cause paramagnetic effects. So you can have engine blocks blow up, and you can blow up aluminized mirrors. Has anybody seen a similarity here? The Strack Sedan hydrogen bomb test in the World Trade Center, does that look similar to you? How many people don't not see a similarity? Just like one of these things doesn't. Well, they look similar because they're called a pyroclastic flow. This is like a volcano. It occurs when you have very, very superheated gases. They become literally a heavier than air particle and superheated mass that can be tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of degrees. And as they flow out, they can move at enormous speeds, hundreds of miles per hour. This is an FLIR infrared satellite photo on September 18th. Hot spots on October, still hot. That doesn't make sense. How come it's still hot? It's actually still hot on February 12th, 2002. There were lakes. We're talking about lakes, not for fish, by the way. These are lakes of liquid molten metal. And yes, you will get liquid molten metal from Thermate, but you can't get the lakes of molten metal and millions of tons of steel turned to atomic particles from Thermate alone. You cannot. That's just a physical. And you can calculate it back. There's a thing called the amount of joules, heat joules of energy required to convert steel into an atomic or a nanoparticle vapor, an atomic vapor, okay? Because 2/3 of the mass of the buildings disappeared. And guess what? They didn't even do it in Las Vegas, okay? And you'll look at this, you say, I can't believe that. Does anybody see this radio tower go poof? 90-some foot radio tower just goes, see it right up there. It's gone. And the reason why it's gone is it was vaporized. It wasn't a Star Wars weapon. If anybody says that foolish theory, let me tell you, that's easy to debunk. What I'm going to show you isn't easy to debunk. And even if only 10% of the debris of the building was affected by what we're going to talk about here, only one specimen in 100 is positive. And I'll show you why. If you look at this gigatesla EMP electromagnetic pulse effect, the lines of force vectors, and this is what Ted Tweetmeyer did, he drew out the lines of vectored force hitting all paramagnetic objects, including plenum chambers and air conditioners, power outage, by the way, and this is all consistent with the data, with a very large radius. It took them 3 to 4 months to get the power back up to that area. The power was out, and all these air conditioners were fried because they're made of aluminum, which is paramagnetic. People are paramagnetic, so guess what happens when an EMP pulse hits people? They turn to dust. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Does that sound like a funeral? People are instantly turned to bone ash. So when you see people walking around after 9/11, it wasn't just wall board that they had on them, it was people dust. Does that make your stomach turn? Does it make you angry? If you don't feel a gut-wrenching rage, as it says in the Bible, be angry and sin not. If you aren't angry at the end of this conference, a rage that will continue for days, weeks, months, and as humanity forever. This is a day of infamy that needs to be remembered by humanity for thousands of millions of years to come. This should never happen again. Look at the fire department of New York and Port Authority police vehicle, mirrors and so on, all catching fire and exploding. Yet other things, if it was just a thermal pulse from a regular conventional weapon, are not affected. Paper is not paramagnetic, so guess what? It's all over the place. Look at these lines of force. These are drawn by Ted Tweetmeyer from the direction of the World Trade Center, so you see the front of the building fried and the back virtually fine. Look at this, fire department in New York. Engine block exploded. Yet the tire's still okay in the back. It gives you a bit of a structure of what a nuclear bomb looks like. Okay, this is what I call Nuclear Bomb 101. Do not watch this if you're Al-Qaeda. I call it El-CIA-da. You have trinitrotoluene. This is an old-style bomb, by the way. It's not your regular Walmart bomb. Split material in the form of a globe of plutonium-239 around it, or uranium-235, and then a neutron source. And often, by the way, around this they have what's called a depleted uranium casing, going right back to the original bombs of Fat Man and so on. They dropped Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Because when you hit these cobalt casing, when you hit cobalt, it goes from cobalt-59 to cobalt-60, which turns the bomb into a radioactive dust bomb that makes the place that you hit radioactive to kill everything for months and years. And so they're called dirty bombs. This shows you a micro-nuke bomb. It gives you a little bit of an idea of what they look like. You have a beryllium source called beryllium-9, and you have polonium-210. Does anybody know about the name Litvinenko? Does that ring any bells? Mr. Litvinenko, by the way, the amount of polonium he must have been exposed to is equivalent of about, they figure between $2 and $4 million worth of polonium-210, because that's how hard it is to come by it. He was apparently working for one of the oligarchs, okay, which are one of these mafia types. And he was transporting this stuff. And of course, it's been thought he was working actually for MI6 because they're trying to bring in an orange revolution in Russia. Lots of bad things. And you'll see lithium deuteride, which is a source of deuterium, which is why when you combine these lithium deuteride molecules with your neutron source, which is the beryllium-9, you end up with the production of a lot of tritium. Tritium, which is heavy water. So you have, and again, without getting into too much detail, we have the fissionable material in there, and you have, if you call a primary fission bomb and a fusion bomb. So these are more advanced. The latest fourth generation ones involve what's called these very, very high-powered, what's called gigatesla type generators, capacitors that can generate these massive magnetic pulses for picoseconds or millionths of seconds. Other ones involve these very, very high-energy pulse lasers that can cause neutron ejection and cause the triggering of a nuclear explosion without using all these other types of triggers. So these are available. They're called fourth generation. What I'm telling you is classified information, but I'm releasing it because you need to know. You have to understand this, by the way, if you hear disclaimers by people that are professors in physics at universities, 4% of information is available up to the PhD level in universities, Canada, the United States, and Europe. 96% is on a need-to-know basis if you're invited. Take that home when you go home to realize if somebody says that can't happen, like you can't use scalar things to neutralize depleted uranium, no weapon is deployed that an antidote has not been developed by the other side. So they wouldn't put DU out there. I don't know what it is, but I've been told that Deagle at Tesla, because I researched this, does have Tesla scalar technology to take radioisotopes and neutralize them. They have other technologies. You can be guaranteed that the fools that did this will leave it out to salt the land like Carthage, but they will then also have the antidote for themselves, just like the avian flu. So we're looking at things like isotopes of beryllium-9, polonium-210, uranium, yttrium. By the way, yttrium showed up in the U.S. Geological Report, which is a very unusual metal that shows up as a component in neutron reflectors in nuclear bombs. Okay, so we're looking at a number of isotopes for analysis. By the way, I'll go back here a bit. The iron, you can get heavy isotopes of iron-58 from insertion of neutrons. These fast neutrons get ejections at millions of electron volts of power, and they enter the nuclei. So if you look at these isotopes, and I'm going to show you here, these are just some of the ones that are, if you look at the data for naturally occurring, things like silicon and so on, carbon. It shows you the percentage which are natural, and it shows you the silicon 29, what percentages, etc. Now, when you have what's called a neutron flux with a nuclear explosion, and it mixes out and hits the neutron, the nucleus, some of these will pick up those neutrons and they become radioactive, and others become stable non-radioactive elements. Okay? This is a theory, and it's well supported. We're testing in our first pass 3 of those isotopes. You'll see them in color: niobium-93, 94. Niobium-94 has a half-life of 20,000 years, and it should not be present above 8.3 parts per million. We're looking also at beryllium-9. Okay? Beryllium-10. If we look at beryllium-10, we should not have more than 3 parts per million. So if we find, 3,000 parts per million of beryllium-10, we got them. They use nukes. And beryllium, being a neutron source in a nuclear weapon, if it's present, will indicate without any shadow of a doubt, this is degrees of medical evidence for indictments of treason and mass death. We are dealing with mass killers of nations. Cobalt-59, if we find cobalt-60, it has a half-life of 5 years, but it still should be present. So we'll see if it shows. Again, we'll have the first of our 3 samples next week. This is showing when you have the 2 tritium ions, you get tremendous energy release, right? When you have these 2 in a nuclear reaction. I'm just going to show you quickly, without looking at each of the lines of this, the calculations we've gone through many times from the U.S. Geological, from the actual estimations of water used by the Port Authority of New York and the fire department, as well as the rain, and the actual calculations of tritium in the water there. And they were trying to say at first it was due to tritium in exit signs, which is ridiculous. Oh yeah, the exit signs did it. I don't think so. I think GW and his brother Marvin, and this is my information from my NSA classified sources, under Project Omega, which is an overseeing agency of all secret agencies on the planet, the Israeli Mossad put the nuclear devices and these other devices in there, along with other agencies of the United States government, to demolish the building on purpose. And everything, including the jet aircraft, was false. In fact, they don't even have proof that it was regular aircraft. What I was told from my Air Force comrades is that, in fact, they were E-10s that were remotely flown in there. And by the way, every commercial airliner for the past 30 years can be taken over by remote control. There isn't one that can't be. So he did the calculations, and you can show very significantly that the samples we calculated are 55 times higher than background. 55, so have a look at that, 55 times higher than background levels. So we determine the exact amount of water. You can go on my website, clayandiron.com. You can pull up the PowerPoint, look at it. If you're a skeptic, go to the links. They're right here. That's right for the government links for their data. In other words, there were government agents that obviously knew this was an inside job, planted the data like an egg hunt. You ever gone on an egg hunt? Guess what? There's where the eggs are. Okay, so you need to look at that. And I'm just going to skip forward because I want to show you these anomalies. All right? If you look at World Trade Center 6 an acre, and you can see the actual calculations, we figured out how much water, et cetera, look through the numbers yourself, and you'll see. Now, there's 30 anomalies, and I'm going to try to go through these fairly auspiciously, but you can go step by step. And again, the first start of these numbers was started by our anonymous munitions expert then, Mr. Shaw, and Rick Siegel of the Blue Star Media Group. They're actually putting together a documentary DVD movie. Number 1, superheated steel beams creating steel vapor comet trails when falling. Submicron pulverization, 99% of the concrete floors. 330-ton sections of the outer wall ripped off. Ponds of molten metal in the basements. And we're not talking about little deposits of metal, but metal even from Thermate would be gone in days or weeks, but not 100 days. It wouldn't be there 100 days. And the temperatures were estimated at 2,500 plus degrees, literally 500 to 800 degrees hotter than the hottest temperatures of a jet aircraft engine operating at perfect ignition and carburation of the jet fuel and oxygen at the back of the turbine. So it's absolutely not possible. This is a meteor, they call it, one of the many meteors that's kept at the Kennedy Airport hangar. Weighs about 4.5, 5 tons. It's molten metal all agglomerated together with steel rods. Okay? This shows that the LiDAR infrared satellites that showed, in fact, some of the places were actually below ground level. The debris piles were so tiny because most of the building literally was turned into a vapor and blown away. How many times have you seen a building blown away just by even conventional explosives, whether it's the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas or any other hotel? It can't occur. 100 days required to cool down. Pyroclastic, massive plumes of debris. We showed you in the pictures. People, computer, and furniture vanished. Vanished. They found body parts 4.5, 5 years later on the roofs a half a mile away of people. Does anybody feel like vomiting now? I'm a trauma doctor, but that makes me sick. Pieces of thighs, bones, skulls. 20% of the World Trade Center dust is made of metals of atomic sizes. And by the way, I can tell you right now that even the most powerful conventional explosives, thermate, super thermate, any other explosives will not turn the mass of 2/3 of these massive millions of tons buildings into atomic vapors. They can't. This shows you the debris outside. Literally, I call it people dust and paper. 9, World Trade Center 1 transmission tower falls, first indicating central support was removed. Tritium levels 55 times background. Witnesses say cars exploded. And by the way, some of them exploded as far away as a half a mile on FDR Drive away, line of sight for the World Trade Center because of the paramagnetic surge that blew up the engine blocks and exploded the mirrors. Wide power outages cut off communications in a very large area. Look at this guy, he's standing on people dust. These are burned out vehicles that are stored still. And vehicles, we're talking about literally fried, the internal electronics fried, the engine blocks fried, the mirrors all blown out. Winter Garden hit by 20-ton steel ejected 600 feet from the World Trade Center. Sharp spikes in seismograph at the Lamont Doherty Earthquake Lab. And by the way, this showed it was like a nuclear explosion. I can tell you, nothing but nukes, micro-nukes, will do this, okay? Brown shades of color in the air due to the radiation forming nitric oxide from nitrogen in the air. It causes the nitrogen to be so activated, it forms nitric oxide, and it forms brown clouds of nitric oxide in the air. Huge expansive clouds taking 5 times the volume of the tower. And by the way, conventional explosives, if you've ever seen any other building demolished to put up a new hotel in Las Vegas or elsewhere, you won't see these huge expansive clouds. And that's the Lamont Doherty that shows literally a 2.1 equivalent earthquake. Rubble height, only 10%. And this is very damning, by the way, because when 23% of the building is just not even there. And by the way, the height of the towers was only 10% of original instead of 33%. So any building ever demolished in the world is 33%. It's a standard rule of demolition. No survivors found except for one isolated stairway without overhead debris. Decontamination procedures seen at World Trade Center, so they're using high-pressure decontamination down there. And by the way, I'm writing the position paper for the American Academy of Environmental Medicine worldwide for Lower Manhattan. I'm the author. And I'm reviewing all the 400-plus types of cancers, which are only seen, and I worked around radioisotopes for decades. I can tell you, are only seen around people exposed to radiation, radioisotopes, and radioactive debris of nuclear weapons like at Rocky Flats. Rooftop, 200,000-gallon water tanks for sprinkler systems, no water in the ruins. Forensic toxicology of trace minerals and isotopes found. And we're looking at these right now. Stay tuned, listen to my show, and if I don't find it in the sample, I'm not going to give up. I'm a bloodhound, and I can smell blood. Cancers are rare types, secondary. Again, if Alex Jones is a bulldog, I'm a Rottweiler. Cancers are rare types, secondary to radiation nanoparticles. We don't want lunch to get cold. We don't want radioactive debris to get cold either. We'll be finished in a minute here. I'm sure your stomachs will be still hot from what I'm going to tell you. Cancers of rare types secondary to radiation and nanoparticles. Very rare cancers, like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. By the way, my daughter was conceived within a year and a half after the first Gulf War, and guess what she has? She has Down syndrome. I guarantee you that there are children around the world, not just in Afghanistan, but in our hemisphere, and people that have got diseases or are dying now or will die from 9/11. Did you know that the world concentration of dioxins and dibenzofurans, which are folate metabolite inhibitors, the same as chemotherapy? Okay? The world is now on chemo. Did you know that? Did you know that the concentrations of these molecules doubled in the whole world? In the whole world. Fibrotic lung conditions secondary to heavy metals and radioisotopes. And by the way, they didn't just die of these toxic levels of these particles. They died of